Anakin! I have the high ground! You underestimate my power!
Hello everyone. The original Scooby-Doo series is something that I hold very close to my heart, and the monsters that the gang faced every episode were both creepy and cunning. For the most part. That's why I've decided to challenge myself and rank every villain in the original series. Will I regret this? Probably. Yeah, I don't know what else to do, to be honest. Here we go. Actually, before we take a look at this shadow-coloured spook, can we just take a moment to appreciate the music? I know this is probably just nostalgia talking, but there's something so enjoyable and, I don't know, it's the type that gets stuck in your head and the kind that's pretty memorable. However, the Black Knight isn't that. I'll give him this. If I saw a tall suit of armour with just a pair of white eyes staring out at me from the shadows, I'd be pretty scared too. But like, come on, he doesn't even have a sword. What kind of knight doesn't have a sword? If I were a Black Knight, I'd have a sword. Come on, dude, where's your damn sword? As for the actual plot, I guess, personally I would steal paintings in a more discreet way, but hey, you do you. I'm giving this guy a C tier, because he is kind of bland and not very scary. At least he tried to capitalise off the legends. By the end, this guy seems like the kind of person to proclaim he's the best at Smash, then make up about 1,000 excuses not to play, and then get his ass kicked immediately. Probably would have won if he had a sword. Now the Phantom is what you might call average. He's your common garden cheat ghost, and I'm not personally scared of laundry. He just kinda seems like a smug dickhead, like that rich kid on the playground that doesn't let anyone use the sandbox because their dad is rich and your dad isn't. Though he does have a pretty sick laugh. The Phantom was just kind of pissing around with the gang for most of the episode. In fact, his entire existence is kind of a piss take. If you're finding treasure on a lost island in the middle of the sea in a foggy storm, your first thought wouldn't normally be, oh man, maybe I should make myself a holographic ghost and scare people away with floating kitchenware. You can go into D tier. Not going to lie, a diver dipped in glow stick goo isn't the first thing I think of when you say scary, but this is a pretty cool and iconic monster. Unlike every other future sea monster, he isn't some mutated flounder fish freak. He left these unnecessary but cool glowy footprints and looked pretty spooky when he came out of the sea. One of my favourite things about the ghost of Captain Cutler would have to be the actual plot of the episode. Obviously Scooby-Doo isn't meant to be an overlapping saga of mysteries and character arcs, but it's pretty refreshing to see the Scooby Gang taken to a new setting, this one being the coast and an underwater marina, so I applaud it for that. The fact that he had apparently died and was using it to steal yachts and sell them off wasn't the silliest plot either. The Cap actually tries to drown the gang at one point, which was pretty unexpected. So all in all, this is a pretty epic monster, so he gets an A tier. Oh, come the f*** on. This is literally just an old man. Did the animation department really run out of ideas on the 4th episode? Seems like they just pointed to a random guy in the street and said, there, he'll be our next monster. They didn't actually do that, did they? Anyway, Miner 49 is just trash. He's got a funny, stupid name, and I cannot remember anything that happened in this episode for the life of me. At least give the poor guy a pickaxe or something. He deserves to be sitting on an armchair with a cuppa, not chasing kids around in a gold mine. F tier. This is a weird one, for 2 reasons. First of all, it kind of features 3 villains, 2 of which are racial stereotypes, and the other 2 are just henchmen. I guess this was acceptable in 1969. I don't know man, there's still something wrong with it. Anyway, this episode is kind of unique because it follows a different plot from most episodes. It sees the gang tracking down these dog nappers in this teched out mystery machine, having been assigned the case from this guy who turns out to be the villain. I'm not sure if dog napping is particularly profitable or whatever, but I know I wouldn't pose as an Indian witch doctor to do it. Get this crap out of here. This is actually going to be a hot take because I don't actually mind this villain. The ghost of Elias Kington, as an actual monster, is just a guy painted blue. I probably could have scrapped the guy. I mean, I wouldn't. Look at that chin. Clearly an alpha male. But the implication was pretty creepy. In the first scene, he gives this ominous vibe to himself. The fact that he was aging people to death was pretty sinister. However, it's too bad he didn't keep it up for the entire episode, because he very clearly became an empty threat later. Sorry, Smurf man, you're going into C tier. Gorillas are scary. The ape man is not. He's more like a McDonald's toy that you eventually twist the head off and lose on the bus. He's just a guy. The entire episode was boring, and I just want to get past this waste of a character. Get into E tier and let's continue. Charlie the robot is solid. He's got that cold, dead, merciless look in his eyes, which is to be expected from a robot. I like the fact that he actually has a conclusion, that being he was a robot gone haywire, but apart from that he's not too interesting or anything. If bad Mega Man cosplays scare you, you're in for a treat. This is another one of those regular people wearing costumes, except this one has Big Ed syndrome, like when you used to draw people with just a circle as a head connected to a rectangle for a body. To be honest, I don't think he's that bad really. The Puppet Master, as you can probably tell, controls puppets, and puppets are pretty scary, especially his. I mean, he is sort of a B-Tech Phantom of the Opera, but come on, that's a pretty sick cloak. Don't you miss the good old days when cartoons could have settings and counterfeit money hideouts? But in all seriousness, this is pretty interesting. Having the theatre as a front for printing fake dollars is a cool premise, and I too would be spooked if I were trapped in a room with the Puppet Master and this Stork the Vast reject. The no-necked Phantom gets a B tier. It's safe to say clowns are scary, and Pennywise's annoying nephew Ghost Clown is no exception. I mean, I'd be scared off by his trim to be honest, but this guy is a perfect example of a creepy monster. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if young Deviator had nightmares about this guy. Imagine just seeing him outside your window. Ugh. Having this episode set in a circus is a pretty obvious choice, but it makes use of it very well, and the circus has an eerie tone, as if nowhere is safe. And that's pretty much true, because it seems like the Ghost Clown can apparently teleport around the place, since he manages to pick off 4 of the 5 members of the gang. The hypnotism trick is quite menacing. You know, I've tried to hypnotize people with a coin too. Never worked. I applaud anyone that can actually make it work. This scarlet coloured stalker lands himself an A tier. There are several problems with this episode. For example, what were the gang even doing in Transylvania? None of the monsters are ghosts in this episode, and they're definitely not f***ing horses. In fact, they're all pre-existing monsters, since I guess Warner Bros needed to bring in that cash from the clout. Nonetheless, the monsters in this episode don't live up to their original forms. The Wolfman seems like a guy called Brad that works at the train station from 9 to 5 and has fish and chips for dinner every day. Dracula looks like that chain-smoking alcoholic ex-husband that embarrasses you every time you see him, on account of dressing up as a vampire. And Frankenstein's monster is just boring. I think the concept of this episode is kind of interesting. Having 3 big-name monsters together in one episode, especially in 1969, would be a pretty big deal, and the fact that they're all played by one villain in the episode is cool too, but they aren't very spooky or anything, and their involvement in the episode ends up feeling lackluster, even though the mystery is sort of interesting. I'm giving them a collective C tier. Oh boy, this monster is going to make you want your mummy. And this one isn't anything too special. Having it also have a curse isn't original either. But this mummy actually turns people to stone, which, you know, I can appreciate some unique powers. I wouldn't necessarily assign them to a mummy, but hey, whatever. I remember having verbal diarrhea.
Oh, get in!
Mummies themselves aren't exactly the most fearsome of monsters. They are just corpses, right? I'd be more scared if it didn't have bandages, to be honest. Even scarier is the smell. mummies would stink up the place, and I don't think Febreze is going to clear that shit up. The villain's plot is above average, I guess. Tracking down the gang to get back the coin was a fresh plot point. This episode was overall quite memorable to me, even though I haven't seen it in a while. I can recall the mystery elements were pretty smart actually, like when Velma deciphers that the glass was smashed the wrong way around. However, I think the main mystery is the case of this magic saw and how f***ing long its cable is. The Mummy of Anka gets a solid B tier. Look, don't let the title deceive you, because there is only one witch. They did it purely for the pun, and the other monster is this. He's meant to be a zombie, but he looks more like an ogre and an elf had a child, but the child was born as an old man. This episode was creepy, especially in the swamp setting, so while these monsters aren't winning any competitions, apart from having the longest chin in history, I will say that their plan is a good one. Basically, they've taken the roles of witch and zombie and are using it to search for an armoured truck that they crashed years ago, which contains a lot of money. It's an eccentric plot, and it overall feels pretty spooky, especially with the voodoo stuff. I'll give this pair of creeps a B tier. Whoever did the sound design in this show deserves an award, because listen to this. The Space Kook is an amazing monster. Everything from his backcrap crazy laugh to his glowing and flashing design is great. If an astronaut was fried to the bone during re-entry and crashed his spaceship into a bubblegum factory, this is probably what would happen, right? Anyway, the Space Kook is brilliant, even within his plot. This episode takes place in an abandoned Air Force base, and this is a unique setting for a Scooby episode. It isn't typically where you'd set a horror mystery episode, but it kind of makes sense within the context of Space Kook's plot, and allows for some interesting and comedic scenarios. So the Space Kook is a very cool monster, and so he's going to be our first S tier. I'm not too big a fan of this reskinned Raft Raider. Once again, this is just a dude in a shitty pirate costume. I mean, is he really a ghost? He just looks like a desaturated piece of cardboard. His laugh is just annoying and he talks way too much. I would not be scared of this guy even if I was high on Ribena and Maltesers. His plot is boring and there was only one good scene in the episode.
How about yum 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 and a liverwurst a la mode? Wow, what a password!
However, the villain had this creepy butler, who you'd assume was the villain, but he never gets mentioned again. Weird. Anyway, the ghost of Redbeard can go hit almost rock bottom in E tier. Now this is epic. I can already tell you these motherfuckers are going into S tier. The green ghosts are iconic, and for good reason. Then excellent twist on classic phantoms, what with the spooky faces, flowing robes, and even the chain, and they've got a terrifying laugh as well. However, this time they're mold flavoured. Now, I'm not a fan of mold, but I am a fan of these creeps. This episode was set in a castle on an island, which isn't new or anything, but it embraced the creepiness very well and created a very haunting environment, which was actually quite suspenseful. The villainous plot also makes sense. Basically, they've lured Scooby and a bunch of other characters here. They're about to inherit $1 million from someone. However, the two hosts, Creeps and Crawls, pick them off one by one so that they can take the money for themselves. This is a cool plot, and since there are more characters than usual, it lets the episode have a murder mystery feel. They're not revolutionary or anything, but it's good to flesh out the cast, and there are lots of locations explored on the island, as well as a lot of detective work. Not only are these excellent monsters, but this episode overall is exemplary of a great Scooby-Doo mystery. Good work. This is what would happen if Saruman lived alone in the mountains. Snow Ghost isn't cool, but at least he stands out from the rest by being, well, a snow ghost. Yet again, he's not really a ghost. I mean, couldn't they have just made him a normal monster? Were ghosts really popular in the 70s or something? Also, he apparently turns people into ghosts, which means he kills them. That got dark very quickly. Nonetheless, the episode is cooler than him, pun not intended, as it includes a legend like in the Black Knight. This one is kind of interesting, as it sees a Tibetan man who escaped a Yeti from Asia and is now being haunted by its ghost. We also see the ghost using hollowed logs to transport jewels around, and that's pretty neat as well. So while the snow ghost is nothing but a hairy old man, his motives bring art to C tier. When I was a kid, I used to find this guy scary. But now that I look back, this is probably the worst offender of guy-painted green monsters in the history of Scooby-Doo. Like, come on. Not only did they brand him as the ghost of Mr. Hyde, they made him so unbelievably dumb that it's pretty funny. He does shit like jumping into a random person's van and just hoping it takes him back to the Hyde Manor, hiding evidence in a random fruit ball in the hole, and being scared of his own reflection, which is rather stupid, innit? He seems like the monster most likely to be a paedophile. His plot was also dumb, but at least this episode contained some funny gags. Apart from that, this nonchalant nonce can piss off into E tier. This episode was focused around Chinese culture, which was nice, and saw this guy and these guys searching for a mask that Daphne buys. I mean, cool mask, and these two aren't bad either. I'm not particularly thrilled or anything, but it's acceptable. There's this one chase scene midway through the episode, and the music is an actual jam.
You know there's a lot that I can show you, and if you wanna go there, I can get you in. Happy is a secret word, and if you're happy, it will get you through. And I love you, you know it's true, and I can make you happy if you love me too.
The scenario is kind of sick actually. Basically, Zentuo leads an international smuggling ring, and each mask has secret locations and stuff. That's a plot point that can be explored even more, and I'd be all for it. So I'm giving Zentuo & Co. a B tier. I believe it was Bren Daniel who first said,
I would be terrified if this large green man screamed his name at me. I'm afraid of heights, clowns, and the Creeper.
That sums it up pretty well. The Creeper is one of the most famous monsters in Scooby-Doo, and for good reason. Memes aside, he would genuinely be scary. He's the precursor to the haha funny green thing go boom. He's like a zombie, except he has scoliosis, and actually bothers to dress up nicely. I mean, for a ghoul-like thing like him, that's some pretty nice strip. As much as I want to like the plot, it's pretty average. The bank manager is using the Creeper as a disguise to steal money. He actually murks the guard to hide his tracks, so you know, he's a dedicated man. For the sheer influence that the Creeper has had on modern culture and society, I have to give him that sweet S tier. Seriously, Scooby-Doo? A caveman? He's not even stylized or anything. I mean, the concept was cool, having a frozen creature escape and terrorize the gang. But once again, this is just a big man with a club. It's Uncle George after a few pints at the pub. It's just boring. The plot is not memorable at all, but hey, at least it takes place in Oceanland. So we have cool fish. Sorry, caveman, you're getting frozen back into E tier. This episode must have been special because the intro font is slightly different. Well, it's not. As I was writing the script for this video, I thought the Headless Spectre would instantly go into E or F tier, but now that I think about it, he wasn't actually too bad. Now, a set of globes with no head isn't exactly the scariest thing, so the episode had to get creative with their spooks, like giving him the laugh of an asthmatic train conductor. The Headless Spectre's presence is pretty ominous. It's a shame he suffers from the same problem as the Phantom did, that being, why? There's some elusive treasure in this one rundown house, so he has to set up this whole Headless Spectre getup before the gang had even arrived. It's pretty pointless, so why doesn't he just disappear into D tier? Ah, another classic. The Witch Doctor probably might be a bit racist too, but he's still a famous Scooby villain. I mean, I'm not personally threatened by his presence. But this is a nice change of pace, as this episode is set on a Hawaiian island. The Witch Doctor is a more light-hearted villain, and he also has a roller skating Gundam, which is pretty cool, I guess. This episode definitely feels more comedic than the rest, and I'm okay with that. The Witch Doctor was actually one of Shaggy's friends, who was scaring away the locals to steal their pearls. It's a decent plot, I suppose. There was also this old man who'd been appearing around. He turned out to be a police officer who'd been tracking the Witch Doctor. I kind of wish this had more of a payoff, but it's fine. I'll give the Witch Doctor an A tier, because the episode is dumb and funny. So you probably don't care, but as a kid I was terrified of werewolves. Like, there was this one episode of DuckTales that gave me the worst nightmare I've ever had. I'm not sure why, but this is probably one of the reasons. I mean, this werewolf isn't scary. He's the ghost of a werewolf, which, I mean, props for thinking of something original, I guess. However, this green ghost must have skipped puberty or something, because he isn't very wolf-like. He's got that mop on his head, but apart from that, there's barely any hair. He later gets trim, and if people could see it, he would actually get his head caved in.
I like it cut, G.
Using barrels to float sheep away was actually kind of smart, maybe. I mean, the werewolf was just to scare people away. You can do it as a vomit-coloured furry. I'll stay over here with my regular animals, thanks. Meanwhile, the werewolf ghost can go into D tier. And finally, we have this mess. Now, I'm no expert on phantoms, but this doesn't look like a ghost to me. It looks more like the Play-Doh statue your son makes and is really proud of, even though it's falling apart by the second. Guys, this is Bert. Bert was a magical ball of wax that was turned into a monster and forced to terrorize a bunch of kids. Please call 1777999399939 to help Bert escape from his terroristic ways. Thank you. I mean, his maker was a reskinned version of Elias Kingston, but even he was creepier than the Wax Phantom. The plot was sort of interesting, as it took place on a TV set and then a wax museum, which leads to some creative scenes. Eventually they find out it was the TV host, so I guess the other guy was just a crackhead? Whatever. The Wax Phantom was pretty good, so I'll give him a B tier. Whoa, this video took almost 2 days to make. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, definitely subscribe or the Wax Phantom will eat you. Okay, bye.